Hi, I'm Micah Halpern. Thank you for joining me today as I do some thinking out loud. Our first segment is called Background Briefing. The first thing I've been thinking about is ISIS and Iran. And for some reason, the Western press did not spend much time covering one of the biggest stories to take place in months, the conflict between ISIS and Iran. ISIS claimed responsibility for the double terror attacks in Tehran, Iran. Iran, however, blamed Saudi Arabia for those attacks that killed 17 of their citizens and wounded dozens of others. Iran is not a fan of Saudi Arabia. They have also blamed the Saudis, along with the United States and Israel, for the creation of ISIS. In Iran's mind, that triumvirate, Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel, created ISIS in order to destabilize the region. Of course, Iran is wrong, but being wrong does not stop Iran from promoting lies as facts. Iran has known that ISIS is gunning for them, literally and figuratively. Iran officials have made very public statements about how they were anticipating the ISIS strikes against their country. They know, too, that these attacks were not merely another element in the usual conflict between Sunnis and Shiites, the sectarian conflict on steroids, devouring large swaths of the Arab world. These attacks were perpetrated by Iranians who joined ISIS. Ali Shamkhani, Secretary of the Supreme National Security Council of Iran, said that the alliance between Iran, Russia, and the Syrian regime, Iraq and Hezbollah, is not temporary. He said that, quote, ISIS will change the geography of its operations from Syria and Iraq and will move to other places, unquote. And Iran thinks they know why. Iran is convinced that ISIS has a serious motivating factor for attacking them. The Iranian logic goes like this. ISIS is now losing its control in its long-held areas and cities in Iraq and Syria. Because ISIS is no longer in command of those cities and large regions, then they need to exert influence in other ways and in other places. The Iranians have a point. ISIS' most important goal are to continue to gain recruits and impose their vision and influence on Islamic lands and societies. ISIS has concluded that the best way to accomplish those goals is through terror. In other words, there is actually an equation at work here. The more land and ground and cities ISIS loses, the more likely there will be a step up in acts of terror. The highest priority targets of ISIS and their terror will be Iran. Then comes the Sunni areas, and the areas that ISIS considers to be easy prey, and then finally, the West. The major conflict between Shiite and Sunni Muslims dates back to the death of Muhammad. The conflict revolved around the question upon whom the great legacy of the Prophet Muhammad would be bestowed. A huge rift was created. There was a power struggle after the death of Muhammad in 632 of the Common Era as to who would become his successor. There were those who believed that the succession should follow the bloodline. There were the Shiites. And then there were those Sunnis who believed that the best successor for Muhammad would be his best student or pupil. From that point in history and onward to this very day, there's been a schism in conflict between Shiites and Sunnis. Massacres and bloodbaths have long been the cornerstone of this conflict. Each sees the other as heretics, and in their world, it is far worse to be a heretic than to be a non-believer. Shiites were persecuted by Sunnis, and both were allowed to kill the other with impunity. Fast forward to the modern times, and you have Sunni ISIS observing and seeing that its Shiites in the region are coming to the conclusion that Shiites have expanded their role over the recent past in the region. The only response ISIS has is to expand its role and check Shiite power grabs. But not everything is working according to plan. There has been an essential shift in ISIS's power over the past 4 months. ISIS is starting to lose battles. Instead of more and more areas falling into the ISIS hands, the way they used to be, now whole regions are falling under the control of Iranian Shiites. Syria, Lebanon, Iraq, all Shiites. They have strong positions and are exerting control and influence. Together with the Russians, Iran has propped up Assad in Syria. Iran has a massive loyal Shiite militia in Iraq. Hezbollah is fighting to keep Assad in power, while also maintaining a strong presence in Lebanon, especially in southern Lebanon. And so ISIS is attacking Iran For their targets, they have selected two highly visible and symbolic locations: the Iranian parliament and the mausoleum of the Ayatollah Khomeini, the founder of the Iranian Revolution. Khomeini was the power in front of and behind the ousting of the Shah of Iran and the creation of the new Islamic Republic of Iran. These were not easy targets to penetrate. They are heavily guarded. Much planning went into attacking these sites. ISIS attacked the heart and soul of Iran. To have chosen lesser targets would have been to water down their message. ISIS needed these attacks in order to reinvigorate their mission and gain back momentum. This was a huge victory for ISIS. Expect more ISIS terror in Iran and in the region. ISIS is not just about Western targets like in London or Paris or Brussels. As much as they hate the West, ISIS circa summer 2017 is even more committed to attacking Shiite targets than Western targets. Coming up next, points of view. Here's what some important voices have been talking about. I want to discuss two items today, one column and one profile. Last week, we had a longer background briefing. This week, we'll spend a little bit more time on columns and what others have been thinking about. Both are from the New York Times. Both are significant and have encouraged people to begin to think, talk, and analyze. First up is a profile from the New York Times. It is by Isabel Kirshner and was published online on June 9th, 2017. It was published in print, in the print edition on Saturday, June 10th, 2017. It was entitled, "A Best-Selling Israeli Philosopher Examines His Country's Inner Conflict." The profile is about Micah Goodman, and it deals with him and his newest book, Catch 67. The title is an obvious play on Joseph Heller's great work, Catch 22, published in 1960. The notion is, a Catch-22 is a double bind, or an unresolvable puzzle. In this case, the Six-Day War is that puzzle for Israel and the Palestinians. Goodman is a gifted writer and philosopher who lives in Jerusalem. He is the son of American Olim who arrived in Israel just before he was born. His mother is a convert from a very traditional Roman Catholic family. This book, Catch 67, is a bestseller in Israel and has raised the discussion in Israel about the importance of the Six-Day War and the importance of its impact on Israel and the Palestinians. This is how Kirshner begins the piece. Micah Goodman, a popular Israeli philosopher of Jewish thought, hates to be labeled. When he lectures about Zionism, he says people assume he's a conservative. When he speaks about liberalism and humanism, he's accused of being a leftist. So, he was hoping his new book, Catch 67, which deals with the Israelis' inner struggle over their conflict with the Palestinians, would break down the monopolies of ideas commanded by the Israeli right and left, open up a healthier national dialogue, and give expression to the largely unheard Israeli mainstream. Then he thought he could get back to his academic life of reading, writing, and teaching. Now Kirshner portrays Goodman as a practical thinker, not a philosopher, who says that war does not resolve issues, and that the Six-Day War is no exception to that rule. And because of that, there may not be a resolution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Quote, "It may be the hottest read in the country right now, but it is not a cheery one. Its prognosis is that there is no possibility of any comprehensive final peace deal between the Israelis and the Palestinians. The reality now is that wars are not decisive," Mr. Goodman said in an interview. "Peace is not either. There are no more 1967 victories. There is no ultimate peace." The profile shows that the book and Goodman have made an impact. The book's argument centers on the paradox that, Mr. Goodman says, poses an existential threat to Israel. Quote, "For years, polls have shown that the majority of Israelis would opt to leave the West Bank and end military control over the lives of millions of Palestinians in order to ensure Israel's future as an internationally accepted state with a clear enough Jewish majority to prevent its becoming a binational country." And here is how he describes the Catch-22 in his Catch 67. Yet the same majority of Israelis believe they cannot withdraw from the highlands of the West Bank, the heartland of any future Palestinian state. They distrust Palestinian intentions and fear for the security of the slimmed-down Israel in what many describe as indefensible borders. So, Mr. Goodman argues, both remaining in the West Bank and leaving it could spell the end of the Zionist project. Goodman describes himself, as many do, as practical. He lives in the West Bank, but he is not a settler in his eyes. Listen to how he puts it. Mr. Goodman lives nearby with his wife and twin 8-year-old daughters in the Jewish settlement of Kfar Adumim. But he said, "I would rather not be called a settler. It's where I live, not who I am." Now the conclusion is very important. Former Prime Minister, Defense Minister, Chief of Staff, Ehud Barak, takes him to task, saying that he is out of his depth. Barak wrote a scathing critique of Goodman's book in Haaretz. But Goodman lashed back, also in Haaretz, the next week. Kirshner concludes the profile by writing this. Mr. Barak noted that a smaller Israel had embarked on one of its greatest victories in 1967. Nobody on the left was suggesting dismantling the Israeli military, he added, suggesting that Mr. Goodman was out of his depth and not qualified to speak for the generals. Mr. Goodman fired back a week later, noting that some right-wing generals oppose withdrawal. Of Mr. Barak, who failed to end the conflict at the talks in Camp David in 2000, and then presided over the eruption of the bloody Second Intifada, he wrote, "It is a fascinating twist for one of the story's heroes to offer his critique of its narrator." This is a very interesting and very important set of ideas. Second up is a column from the New York Times. The column is called "Why Qatar is in the Naughty Corner," and it's written by Raymond Barrett. The piece appeared on June 6, 2017. The piece takes Qatar to task for supporting Hamas and the Muslim Brotherhood. Barrett is the author of Dubai Dreams, Inside the Kingdom of Bling. Here's how Barrett begins. In the opaque world of Arab diplomacy, things are never quite as they seem. On the surface, the reason Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the United Arab Emirates and Egypt cut air, land, and sea travel to the small peninsula state of Qatar this week was straightforward enough. The Gulf states accused their emirate neighbor of giving succor to Islamist extremism, including the so-called Islamic State. Barrett gets down and says that the reason there's a problem with Qatar is that Qatar is suggesting that Iran be treated like a regional power and that their support for Hezbollah and Hamas is important. This is a real problem because Qatar is a Sunni country, and they're siding with the Shiites. He continues, the more heinous sin for which Doha is being punished is its willingness to acknowledge that Iran occupies a position as an important regional power, and that political Islamists like Hamas and Hezbollah have a role to play in determining the future of the Middle East. To put it bluntly, Qatar is being penalized for refusing to accept the status quo of the past 40 years and for daring to challenge the conventional wisdom in the Gulf that bashing Tehran, buttressing military strongmen, and suppressing political Islamicism are the right path for the region. Now Barrett presents a more realistic image, saying that Qatar has made some big errors. He writes, for the governments in Saudi Arabia, the United States, and Israel, such divergent thinking is not merely undesirable, but heretical. While these three powers pay lip service to the idea of peace in the Middle East, narrow self-interest increasingly drives their thinking, and this short-sighted calculation underpins their unlikely seeming alliance. This is not to paint Qatar as an innocent party that deserves no criticism. Doha's posture since the Arab Spring as a champion of political reform stands in marked contrast to the near feudal nature of its own system of governance, whereby the ruling Al Thani family and some 200,000 Qataris hold sway over a population of about 2 million foreign residents. In conclusion, Barrett says that there is a new game plan coming out of the United States, and Qatar does not agree with the plan and has not adjusted to it. He writes, since Mr. Trump has surrounded himself with a coterie of advisors obsessed with the twin threats of Iranian influence and radical Islam, it makes sense that the Saudis decided this was the moment to act. Punishing Qatar and isolating Iran also fit with the Israeli government's assessment of its strategic interest, as it confronts Hezbollah forces to its north and Hamas in Gaza on its southwestern border. Caught out by the United States' new orientation, Doha is learning there is a price to pay for questioning the established orthodoxy. Coming up, commentary through cartoons, where pictures tell the story. We're going to look at a few cartoons today. The first two are from Dry Bones and the Jerusalem Post, drawn by Yaakov Kirshen. They both deal with England. I've been using Dry Bones a lot lately because he's just so good, and because he deals with the very same subjects this show addresses. This first cartoon is called Islamicism in the UK, and it was published on June 5th, 2017. The cartoon depicts terrorists in their van, then stabbing innocents, and the caption reads, "The Islamists in Britain are fighting the occupation of Britain by the British." This cartoon is hard to laugh at, but is so, so true. The second cartoon is also by Yaakov Kirshen. It is entitled UK Election Results, and it was published June 11th, 2017. Two intellectuals are speaking. The first says, after cutting 20,000 from the police force, and with Britain now in the grip of Islamist terror, it was probably not the best time for the British Prime Minister to call for an election. The second intellectual says, you think? The British election was a huge error in timing. British Prime Minister May was not up for election until May of 2020. She made a tremendous, colossal error. Next up is a cartoon by Sabir Nazar and was published on Kagel, June 7, 2017. It's entitled Sword Dance in the Middle East. Two hand puppets are fighting with swords, and they are controlled, one by Iran and one by Saudi Arabia. Next up is a cartoon from the Netherlands by Tom Jansen, and it was published June 7, 2017. It is called Boycott Qatar. A Saudi is holding up a large bloody sword, and he's saying, Qatar supports the wrong Islamic extremists. The humor here is found in the fact that Saudis have their own extremists, the Wahhabis. Next up is a cartoon from Austria, and it's by Marian Kamensky. It was published June 7, 2017. Isis is a bird perched on a nest on a tree. The eggs in the nest are the Saudis, Bahrain, the Emirates, and Egypt. Trump flies headfirst into the tree trunk, and the Qatar egg, which was there, gets dislodged, and we see it falling to the ground. In other words, Trump's disturbed the whole situation, and they are all part of ISIS. This final cartoon is from Greece. It's called War Makes Terror, and it was published June 6, 2017. The cartoonist is Michael Kontouris. The cartoon is a picture of a knife covered in blood, and the handle of the knife is a city destroyed by war. The idea is that the war destroyed the city, and that led to the creation of more terrorists. This is a classic European perspective on the rise of terror, and the notion is that war creates terror itself. It's wrong, just 100% wrong. In a moment, my own perspective and a few predictions. The price of oil dropped 39 cents recently. Those watching the market are expecting the price to continue to fall. This happened on the same day that OPEC decided to continue to drop its output. But conventional wisdom would say, when OPEC reduces output, the price of oil should shoot up. So why has it dropped? There are two reasons. The first, there has been a surge of output from elsewhere in the world, filling the gap that is created by OPEC. The United States, for example, has increased production by over 10% over the last year. Second, instability in the Middle East is telling the market that OPEC members will not hold to the restrictions on output. But both of these reasons telegraph a message to the market. This is how we predict markets and prices. Now, just in case you thought that the real sense of calm had settled over Jerusalem and that terror was a thing of the past, here's a reality check. The border police of Israel arrested 2 bomb makers in a midnight raid recently. The raid took place in a home located in the Arab village of Abu Dis that abuts Jerusalem. The police confiscated bomb-making materials. They assert that since January, these bomb makers built 30 bombs that were used in acts of terror. Most of them were thrown at Israelis. The 2 bomb makers were arrested for making bombs and for exploding them. Here's some big news. The Kurds of Iraq have announced that in September they will vote on seceding from Iraq and creating their own independent Kurdish state in the Kurdish Independent Region. This is a tremendous move. Masoud Barzani, president of the Kurdish regional government, made the announcement on his Twitter feed. About 5 million Kurds live in the region. They have been relatively autonomous since the establishment of the new Iraq after the fall of Saddam Hussein. They're very productive. They have great oil reserves. Tensions emerged when the national government tried to lay claim to those oil reserves. But since the rise of ISIS, the national government has been hands off the Kurdish region, freeing them to fight ISIS and allowing them to use their oil profits to fight ISIS. The tide might be turning. Recently, Jeremy Corbyn, leader of the Labour Party in England, who scored a significant victory in the British elections, has justified the actions of terrorists to create websites to raise money for terrorist acts. 2 terrorists admitted to creating websites with the purpose of raising money for the exclusive purpose of terror attacks. They were extradited to the United States, where they were convicted of terror. In October 2012, Coburn said on the Islam channel that the 2 terrorists had done nothing wrong. Coburn asserted that these 2 were protected under the concept of freedom of speech, that it was wrong to arrest, extradite, and convict them. Watching him defend the terrorist is simply shocking. It's no wonder that the Labour Party is failing and that so many Jews have left the party. The party must throw Coburn out, and then they must rebuild. Mahmoud Habash is the advisor on religious affairs to the Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas. In a recent Friday sermon, Habash made it very clear that the Western Wall must remain in Muslim control. Habash said, "It is an Islamic endowment that absolutely cannot belong to non-Muslims. It is our property and endowment. It is impossible to concede 1 millimeter of it." This is a gut issue for the Palestinians. These statements contradict statements made just days before by another Abbas advisor, Jabil Rajoub, who spoke on Channel 2 Israel News. Rajoub said that the Western Wall will stay under Jewish control in any agreement with Israel. This is a classic move by the Palestinian leadership and the advisors of Abbas, who often say whatever they need to say. It all depends on the audience they are addressing. To the mosque, it's one message. To the Israelis, it's a very different message. The big question is, which one will it be? We've been thinking out loud about a lot today. Now that you know what I've been thinking, let me know what you're thinking. Email me at micah@jbstv.org. Tweet me at Micah Halpern. Before we end, let me leave you with one piquante piece of information. Did you know that Saudi Arabia was actually a gift to the nomadic tribe of Saud? The head of the tribe was Ibn Saud. The name Saudi Arabia actually means that it belongs to the house of Saud, Arabia that belongs to the house of Saud. The area of modern-day Saudi Arabia formerly consisted of 4 distinct regions: Hejaz, Najd, parts of eastern Saudi Arabia, and of course the southern Arabia. The Kingdom of Saudi Arabia was founded in 1932 by Ibn Saud. He united the 4 regions into a single state through a series of conquests beginning in 1902 with the capture of Riyadh, the ancestral home of his family, the House of Saud. The country has since been an absolute monarchy governed along Islamic lines. Saudi Arabia actually hosts the minority school of thought in Islam, Wahhabism. That's the official form of Islam in Saudi Arabia. It's an extremist form of Islam. Just to prove the point, Al-Qaeda subscribes to this very form of Islam. Thank you for thinking out loud with me, Micah Halpern. Let's think out loud again next week on JBS.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support JBS, the Jewish Broadcasting Service, with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the JBS homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to Jim, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.